Stand down, Joker. This is the police. We have you surrounded. Release the hostages.
Fine, but on one condition.
What are your demands?
Well, I have this question, and only my good friend Batman can answer. How does context affect teaching and learning? Tell him I'll be waiting upstairs.
Thanks for meeting me here, Batman. Do you have the answer?
Yes, I've read some articles and watched some videos. Time to answer that question.
Batman, how does context affect teaching and learning?
Although it's been stated multiple times, an important part of teaching students is getting to know them, their personalities, their economic situation, and the ways in which they need to be supported. Teachers gather data in order to build a framework of understanding, in order to build a frame of reference to guide classroom instruction. In other words, the data shows them what they need to focus most on in class. I was talking to some guy named Alan, and he told me that earlier this week when he was at field placement earlier this week, his cooperating teacher had his 4th period class do a pre-assessment quiz on the upcoming unit, about the Greek and Persian War. That allowed him to figure out what the students might already know, and what needs to be explained in more detail about. Since we're on the topic of data, I've read an article about report cards and why they shouldn't be taken out of context. To summarize, report cards don't give you the full story in regards to a student's intelligence or even their academic ability. Rather, they demonstrate the performance of the school districts. It's also important for teachers to understand their students' financial situation. That doesn't mean they should know the exact amount of money in their family bank account. I mean, I am rich, because I'm Batman, but that's besides the point. What I mean to say, if some students are in poverty, their teachers should understand where they're coming from and not allowing it to deter their commitment to teaching them. To quote the article Leading Learning for Children from Poverty, effective educators acknowledge the struggles impoverished children face. To summarize, teachers need to take into context the struggles students deal with in order to find a way to meet their academic needs effectively. Remember that guy I told you about earlier?
Alan Bridges?
Yeah. Well, the article also talked about how teachers can only impact school and classroom life for students. When he was in middle school, his home life wasn't that great a lot of the time. I won't get into specifics, but because of the situation, his teachers were responsible for helping him make sure he was able to stay on task. A teacher's job is to educate and respond. I'm not actually mad right now, it just sounds cool with this animation. A teacher's job is to educate and respond. Once they have the context, there are several ways in which educators can use it in their teaching.
And what might those be?
I'm glad you asked. The 7 ways to educate and respond to children, especially those in poverty, include: teach with confidence, establish high and consistent expectations and practices, make reading the default curriculum, or in other words, emphasize the importance of building their language skills, use data to inform instructional changes, restructure time and space for more flexibility and in responding, create student-centered learning and culturally responsive lessons, but most importantly, use multiple ways to keep students actively engaged throughout the teaching and learning process. Something else teachers should do is establish an environment where every child is accepted and nothing less than their absolute best is expected. The students who are at the biggest risk of failure are those who are given low expectations by their teachers. If teachers don't expect much from their students, especially those at a disadvantage, they aren't given as many expectations to live up to and are statistically less likely to succeed. Failure is not an option. Going back to what I said previously about knowing students, it's important for teachers to build a student-teacher relationship. They should get to know their students in order to gain more context in order to teach them properly and effectively. As a teacher, that guy Alan Bridges is going to make sure his classroom is an open environment where, in order for him and his students to work together in a way that best benefits their education. Another way that context affects teaching and learning is gathering information about the location of the school. The school Alan Bridges goes to is more middle-class Westerville, so it's not exactly urban in terms of diversity. Regardless, community mapping is a perfect example of using context clues in teaching. Getting to know the area, talking to locals, going around the community. All of these are examples of how teachers can gather information about the school environment in order to gain an understanding as to what kind of an environment students are growing up and learning in. Because of that, they're better equipped to be culturally responsive.
Good job, you answered my question. The hostages are free.